everyone, my name is Ridhima. I'm an anchor, facilitator and a communication specialist, and I welcome you all to this platform called Creativity Rules, where we get you stories, anecdotes and narratives with a genuine intent to demystify the DNA of creativity and creative thinkers. The two stories that I'm going to share with you all today render two very pertinent lessons. Lesson number one: when you're in the process of solving a problem and you're getting stuck and you intensify the same solution or do more of the same thing and yet you find yourself getting stuck, it's a good indicator for you to take a step back or take a complete detour and actually try to do either the complete opposite thing or try and experiment with a different approach. So in those moments, it's important to ditch the norms and embrace the roller coaster that comes along. Lesson number two: how actively are you deploying your listening, sensing and observing to capture insights about your customer and later translate those insights into a compelling story? You see, when you do that actively and you share this story with your customers in the form of campaigns, you don't really need to sell your product or brand because the story itself creates a magnetic pull. So, let's get started. Time for story one. There was a chief of police officer in Florida. He and his team used to particularly have a tough time during spring break. Because during spring break, hordes of college students used to descend onto Florida, get drunk, commit petty crime and get arrested and locked up. The quantity of these students became so many that it became unmanageable to manage them in the lockup. To tackle this situation, the chief of police officer and his team experimented with different approach. The first approach was to increase the duration of punishment. So from 1 day, the punishment got increased to 2 days. It didn't work. They experimented with a second approach. They cut down on the ration. So instead of serving them bread and water, they served them only water. Again, it didn't work. At this point, the chief of police officer had an insight. The insight was, the more intense and severe the punishment became, it encouraged more college students to get locked up. Because once these college students were released, they used to brag in front of their friends that they got locked up, and it became a college ritual for them to turn from boys into men. So he thought and he actually came up with a solution. The solution was that the punishment was reduced from 2 days to 1 day. But there was one difference. The difference was he replaced the bread or water with baby food. And suddenly it was not so manly for these adrenaline pumped college kids to get locked up and tell their friends that they had baby food inside the lockup. And this is how the chief of police officer and his team solved this problem. Which relates back to lesson one that I shared in the beginning. There are times when you get stuck on a problem, take a step back and try a completely different or a completely opposite or a counterintuitive approach. In this case, he actually reduced the duration of punishment and the solution worked on replacement of bread and water with baby food. What do you think about this story? Do share your views. Thank you. Time for the second story. This is the time when P&G hired BBDO, a global advertising agency, to work on its flagship brand called Ariel. The mandate received by the BBDO team was simple. They wanted to create a campaign which enables Ariel to create an emotional relatability with the brand. When I happened to speak to Mr. Paul Joshi, chairman at BBDO, he said while we were visualizing this campaign, we were clear about one thing, that we are not going to highlight about the USP of Ariel, which is that it removes the toughest stains in a single wash. Instead, we asked ourselves a fundamental question. The question being, how we can use Ariel as a brand to empower the lives of women. To delve deeper into this question, they asked themselves a second round of questions. The question being, What does the daily schedule of men and women look like? To get insights, they conducted confession sessions at BVDO office with their teams, and through a series of conversations, they stumbled upon a glaring insight. The insight being Indian men, on an average, spend 19 minutes, 19, on daily chores, while Indian women spend a whopping 5 hours. Now, this discrepancy was huge, and there has been a tension simmering in different households. They used this insight to curate and visualize an award-winning campaign at Ariel called Ariel Share the Load. This campaign was born in January 2015, where they asked a very uncomfortable question: that is doing laundry only a woman's job? Ever since then, every year, Ariel asks an uncomfortable question and reveals a new truth. For example, in 2016, they asked a question that kids end up imitating what they see their parents doing. Are fathers doing the laundry? And thus, in 2016, Fathers Share the Load campaign was born. In 2017, the question they asked is, are we raising our sons the way we raise our daughters? And hence, Sons Share the Load campaign was born. Cut to 2020, when work from home culture was instilled, they stumbled across another glaring insight. The insight being 71% of the women said that they sleep less owing to the pressure of professional commitments and household chores. And thus, Ariel Share the Load for Equal Sleep was born. This campaign has won accolades at Cannes and world over. And what has truly worked in its favor, as Mr. Paul Joshi said, is that it leveraged empathy over expertise to communicate with its consumers. Secondly, they didn't only use insights, but they actually were able to incite the audience with these insights. And thirdly, emotions eat logic for breakfast. So while this was a very emotional campaign, but it was backed by a very solid insight and information that Indian men spend 19 minutes in household chores and Indian women spend 5 hours. So your emotional campaigns need to be backed by solid information. Now, if I relate this entire story to lesson number 2, which I shared with you in the beginning, the lesson is, how intently are you using listening, sensing, observing to understand your customers and your consumers? Do you know what their pain points look like? Do you know what their aspirations look like? If not, it would be a good start point to begin now. Thank you.